Hey everybody, good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Tyngsborough TV Live. My name is Steve Brogan, I'm the Town Media Director, and today I have another candidate interview in this contested Senate race that's going on. There's a number of candidates that are running for the seat. I've interviewed a few other candidates from some other races, namely Register of Deeds and the state rep race. However, I hadn't done any official, or put out any official calls to do interviews for the Senate race, but I did allow any candidate that would that so choose to contact me, and they could come on and do an interview, and we could talk and put them out there so that you guys could get some more information on these candidates. And today my guest is none other than former city councilor and former mayor of the city of Lowell, Mr. Bill Martin.
Hey, Steve. Great to be with you. Good to see you again.
You too. Thanks for coming on. So, full disclosure, I was working in Lowell when Bill was on the city council. Actually, Rodney Elliott as well. He was on the city council as well when I worked there. So I know these guys from beforehand. But he wanted to come on, so we got to chatting, and he wanted to come on and do an interview as well. So I figured now would be a good opportunity. So everybody knows, you can watch these videos that we're putting out on our Facebook channel, Facebook page, excuse me. On the multiple pages that we share it out across through the town. You can also watch us on YouTube now, so you can watch us live right on YouTube, as well as after the fact, obviously, as well, which is really cool because YouTube, you can watch it on TV too, which is really nice. And you can also watch us on Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 29 here in Tyngsborough, and through tyngsboroughma.gov on our live streaming and video on demand service. So you can watch this multiple different ways. And I do want to make one extra note that if you're watching this on either YouTube or Facebook, feel free to chime in, ask questions if you have anything interesting and you want to pose those questions to the candidates. You are more than welcome to. I'm actually watching the streams as we go, so just kind of looking for any comments. So if you have those, feel free to chime in. So with all that said, Bill, as a candidate for Senate, why don't you tell me first a little bit about yourself, tell the folks about yourself, and then why you decided to run for Senate.
Sure, Steve. So as you said, I'm a former mayor, former city councilor in the city of Lowell. Born and raised in Lowell, from pretty modest background. My father was a union worker at New England Telephone. My mother was a clerk at Prince Spaghetti Factory. A lot of people still remember Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day.
Right,
so,
yeah.
Prince Spaghetti Factory was right out my backyard.
Nice.
And
that's awesome.
And that's where my mother worked. So, but I had the good fortune to go to good schools, graduate of Holy Cross College and Boston College Law School, where I received, number of honors and awards. Did well in school and became a law clerk at the Supreme Court here in Massachusetts for a year. And then went to work at a major Boston law firm called Hale & Dorr at the time. It's now known as Wilmer Hale. And worked in town for about 6 years, Always lived in Lowell. And then I decided I kind of wanted to do something different, and met up with a fellow named Lou Eno, well-known real estate attorney, really statewide, but had a practice based in Lowell, and looking for some younger people at the time to come in and work with him. And so I did. I left the Boston firm. I worked with Lou Eno. He passed away a few years ago, but sort of took over his practice, and I do a lot of development work, transactional work, representing companies that want to come into the area, representing small businesses that are kind of too small to have their own in-house counsel, and we serve as that role for them. So that's what I've done professionally, and politically, as you said, 16 years in the city council, 2 years as mayor, where you also chair the school committee.
Right, yeah.
So
it's a busy job.
It is, and so in the school committee, at least in my time there, the budget was over $150 million, oversee 13,000 school children, so significant commitment. And, when I moved back to Lowell, my practice, even though I always lived there, as I said, it was really a chance to have a more integrated life, right? Like, so I could become the mayor. I could run for office. I could coach my kids in Little League. I should mention I'm married, father of 3 adult children, 3 children in their 20s now. I've been through college, so I feel the pain of people at college costs, and
right, yeah.
And we can talk about that maybe.
Sure, yeah.
So, I've sort of spent my professional career and my political career trying to advance the interests of Greater Lowell, to make the business environment better, to make the education environment better. And so that's really the reason I'm running for the state Senate seat. I view it sort of as a continuation of my life's work, my professional work. I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. I've had a 16-year political career. And I think this is kind of the next logical step. I do think, you know, the Massachusetts economy is doing well by many measures, and but it's not doing well for everybody.
Right.
You know, even in this congressional race, if you look at some of the polling data, the number one issue people still talk about that's on their minds is jobs and economic security, and we need to do better. You know, Massachusetts as a whole is doing well. The Boston area is doing well, and I'd like to see more opportunity and, you know, our fair share of that opportunity come up to this district. You know, to come up to places like Lowell and Tyngsborough. Westford's another town in the district. I'll try to focus on Tyngsborough for today, but really I think you know, we need to do better. And I think if you talk to the former Senator Eileen Donahue, she's really bullish about the opportunity we have in this area. And I think, you know, Governor Baker would like to see more gateway type communities and like Greater Lowell get a better share of business opportunity. So I think that's, you know, the number one reason for me. It's not the only reason for me. But I view it as, you know, I think I'm the best prepared candidate given my professional training. I speak the language of businesses. I represent businesses every day, and I know what they need, and I think I can convince them to come to this area. So that's a major reason for my run. It you know, it provides jobs for people. It helps broaden tax bases for communities. There's a lot of benefits that come from having a good business development climate.
So you spent 16 years on the council, two as mayor. Would you say, or what would you say, I guess, was something in that time that particularly prepared you for a run for Senate, or at least to be a good senator, let's say?
So a couple different things. So I mentioned that the time as mayor, chairing the school committee. Certainly every community has issues with school funding. I think the legislature missed an opportunity this year with school funding. You know, they've the whole budget review, foundation budget review commission that the legislature put together came up with recommendations, yet they failed to implement them. And I do think, you know, Massachusetts made a great step forward in 1992 with education reform, but, you know, that's been over 25 years now, and the time is ripe for new reform. I think everybody agrees, and it didn't happen. And so, given the experience I have, seeing what communities deal with special education costs, healthcare costs, things that really have escalated since the initial round of ed reform and that need attention, I think that's an experience I have serving locally that prepares me to do this job at the state level.
Okay, excellent. What would you say would be your number one goal if you were to get elected as state senator?
So again, I think I want to create a climate where companies feel welcome in the first Middlesex district, a place like Lowell, a place like Tyngsborough, and convince companies to sort of take a look at these areas as opportunities for growth. I've had represented clients in the Tyngsborough area, obviously represented clients in Lowell, and I try to convince people that we have a lot to offer in this part of the state, and you don't just need to set up shop in Cambridge to be successful.
Right, good point, yeah. Do you have any other sort of major goals that you'd like to focus on in your first, let's say your first year as a senator?
Yeah, so I'd like, you know, I'm going to emphasize, and I think there was a recent, you know, economic development jobs bill that was passed in the legislature, but we need to do more. You know, we need, you know, again, I want to make the focus not just the Boston area, but also in this district. So that's one thing.
Okay.
Education reform we talked about a little bit. So that's something I certainly would make a priority during my first term. I think relief, property tax relief for our senior citizens. You know, we have an exemption now for senior citizens. Hasn't been looked at in many, many years. And I think the time's ripe to increase that. Property taxes keep escalating, but senior citizen incomes generally are stagnant and don't increase. And so I think that's it's time to look at that and provide property tax relief for senior citizens.
Okay. So you mentioned you have kids that have gone through the school system and college, obviously, and gone through, so you understand the pain of having to pay college bills and the expense, obviously. What would you do to try to mitigate some of these costs, the ever-increasing, seemingly, costs of higher education? Yeah.
So I think a number of things. I think the state college system, my My wife and all my children are graduates of UMass Lowell.
Okay.
But times three, it's really expensive.
Very, yeah. I'm sure.
So I think the administrative costs at the state, and not just at UMass, but throughout the state college system, are, really need a fresh look, because they drive costs, they drive tuition, they drive fees. So I think reform of administrative costs, but I also think we could do better leveraging our community colleges. We have, and there's been recent stories in the media now about even elite colleges that are accepting students as sophomores.
Really?
Yeah. And so they encourage somebody to go to another school during their freshman year. And I think we have an opportunity with our community colleges. So if a student would go to a much lower cost place, a Middlesex Community College, for example, and get a quality education and credits that could then be transferred into the state university system, then you're looking at a cost that's much more manageable for a 4-year degree. Right, the cost at community colleges is significantly lower. The instruction is very good, so we need to keep that quality and then have those credits transfer into the university. So I think some of that goes on now, but it's not nearly as effective as it could be.
Okay.
And I'd be an advocate for that.
Excellent. So maybe finding some more efficiencies there where kids could,
Yeah,
like
just
you said, move
more
around.
opportunity.
Yeah.
More programs that offer transfer of credits.
Okay. So on the flip side of college, you have trades in the trade schools. Would you do anything or have any focus on that in order to, maybe get kids to focus on trade schools so they wouldn't end up with these massive college debts that they could end up with?
Right. So, I've been an advocate for education at Greater Lowell Tech. We each of the communities, when I was on the council, approved a bond for them for that school to expand and essentially, new cafeteria, new lab space, all that. The disappointment was we weren't able to present a plan that would accept more students, right? So I think the quality of the school, the quality education is good, but it doesn't take everybody that wants to go there. So, yeah, I think we're in need in the country, not just in Massachusetts, of sort of a post-high school sort of apprenticeship program, right? Whether that's coding a computer. I mean, the building trades do this well, right? You could be an apprentice plumber, apprentice electrician, and those programs work well, and they work well for those industries. I think we need similar things for other industries, in the high-tech industry, even in simple manufacturing. I have some manufacturing clients, and you wouldn't believe the knowledge that you need to operate a machine. When I was in college, I worked in a board shop, digital equipment, manufacturing circuit boards. You didn't need a whole lot of training, right? Your training was your first 10 minutes on the job. You put in this piece of sheet metal here, you push that button there, you take it out, you do it again, right?
Right. Yeah.
It was pretty basic stuff.
Yeah.
Machines these days are very sophisticated, right?
Yeah, they're all computerized now.
Right, and you really need, and you don't want to shut it down. You need to keep the line running, and you really do need an advanced level of training. And so I think, I don't have an answer for that, but I think there's a need, and I think the state needs to help with that.
Okay. So living in Massachusetts, this is obviously a very environmentally friendly state. Everybody's very not even just Massachusetts, but Massachusetts is one of those places I've always noticed is very environmentally focused. As a state senator, what would you do to help improve the environmental issues here in the state?
So let me talk about what I've already done.
Okay,
first.
sure, yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I've been a strong environmental advocate my whole adult life, right? Before I was a city councilor, I served a number of years on the Lowell Conservation Commission.
Oh, okay.
Was chair, so I think 8 years as total. A few of those years was as chair. So I get those issues. I was also a long time member of the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust, which was a urban-based land trust, which may seem counterintuitive to a lot of folks. But the land trust, we were looking to preserve unique environmental spaces in the city of Lowell. And a couple things we did. We wanted to draw attention to the Concord River. Everybody knows the Merrimack River is in Lowell. Right. But the Concord goes into the Merrimack. And we started off simple. We had a kayak race. We were able to attract an Olympic medalist into our kayak race. We
that's cool. Yeah.
Sponsored whitewater rafting. every spring on the Concord River in Lowell. I've been whitewater rafting up in Maine, and I see what it's like on the Concord River. It's really just as good. The ride's a little shorter,
Right.
you know, but it's really just as intense.
Yeah.
With 3 sets of rapids there, right through downtown Lowell. on
There,
the
I want to
Concord
say they
River.
were like was it level 4 rapids
Yeah.
or something? They're like
Yeah,
really
it's-
intense rapids. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the level of spring rain.
Right.
But yeah, class 4 whitewater, and right in downtown Lowell. And so we did that to promote the river. And so fast forward a few years, and now we have funding for a river walk, which
Mhm.
is under construction. There's going to be a footbridge over the river.
Mm-hmm.
And all that's due to the work of not just me, but people like me that put their time in with the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing the Land Trust did, there was an FDIC auction way back when, the Edward Street soccer fields that are named for Ed Walsh in the city of Lowell.
Mm-hmm.
Those soccer fields were going to be developed into 280 condo units. The bank had failed. The FDIC took it over, was part of a nationwide auction. Our land trust worked with the Trust for Public Land and the city of Lowell to break that property away from the auction,
Mm-hmm.
sell it to the Trust for Public Land, who eventually sold it to the city of Lowell. And today we have this beautiful soccer complex. We have hundreds and hundreds of kids that play soccer every day
Mm-hmm.
at Lowell Youth at the Walsh Soccer Complex. Lowell Youth Soccer gave an award to the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust for our work
Mm-hmm.
in making that project happen. So I've got a long history of environmental advocacy and making things happen for
Mhm.
people in the district.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So so those issues are important to me. I would continue to be environmental advocate at the State House. I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to do something about plastic bags, for example.
Right. Yeah.
It's-
Didn't the city just pass a plastic bag ordinance?
The city did. You know, I'm no longer a counselor. I think we mentioned I didn't
Right,
run
yes.
for re-election last time, but the city did. But again, I think that's something that needs to be addressed on a statewide level.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest problem with those bags is how much they clog the recycling process.
Right. Yeah. Major
You know,
problems with those.
if you have bags in the recycle stream, it kind of fouls recycling, and you see municipalities now having higher and higher costs to dispose of their recyclable material because it's contaminated with things like bags. So,
Okay.
so that I think would be an issue that would have to be dealt with right away when the legislature reconvenes in January.
Okay. So on the flip side of that sort of piece, what would you say to businesses now who might grumble, oh, I like using the plastic bags and they're cheap and all that stuff? How do you balance it out with them?
So I think we need to work with industry to find a different solution.
Okay.
Right, and I think part of that's ongoing now. I think, you know, business wants to be a partner here in Massachusetts. I
Mhm.
think people that operate businesses know this is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key to getting business to cooperate, is to have a sensible timetable, to have a sensible alternative. There are different materials now that are starting to be experimented with,
Mhm.
you know, for different types of bags that you can carry away from the store. So I'd engage the business community. I don't think there should be a mandate from the legislature. I think you need to work with businesses to get a feasible solution.
Excellent. So you're not necessarily one of those that we need to pass a law or something in order to get rid of this. We can find other ways to make this work without having to legislate it, basically.
Well, I mean, I think in the end it probably does need to be legislation, but
Okay.
I think you can work with the business community to get something that works for everybody.
Okay, that makes sense. Fair enough. Another major topic, for the last number of years now, is the opioid issue. As a state senator, what would you attempt to do to rectify the situation?
Yeah. So again, no easy solutions here, but
Right.
we've started to see, I think, some things have success. You know, there's been a recent bill passed by the legislature at the end of the session.
Mm-hmm.
I think that imposes restrictions on the prescription end, right? So
Mhm.
that you need to really demonstrate a need for an opiate to get a prescription. And there's much better monitoring now as to who is filling prescriptions and how many pills they're taking, and it sets off triggers. So
Mm-hmm.
I think on the front end, to avoid people becoming addicted, we've taken at least a good first step. Things that I think need more attention are treatment programs, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
The state, in my role as a legislature, I think we need to fund treatment programs. But I think beyond just funding of programs, I think we need to do better with protocols. You know, what works, what doesn't.
Okay.
You know, and test and monitor what works. And toward that end, you know, we've got a couple test sites around the state that are showing some promise. One about aftercare and one about urgent care,
Mhm.
right? So So there are 3 now urgent care centers, just like, you wake up and you have a cold and you go to a urgent care center instead of an emergency room, right? Happened to me when I broke a toe, right? I had to go in and, I didn't need to go into an emergency room. I got taken care of. And there are urgent care centers that deal with the opioid addiction.
Okay.
There are only 3 of them statewide, none in this area. But their goal is to, somebody decides they want help, right? They know they're addicted. They know they need help. They're ready to get help today. And if you can deal with them the day they're ready to get help, you have a much better chance of success than if you turn them away 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, find them a facility that's going to take them in and help them. By then they may be back on the street. They're using again. They're not. Whatever the event was that triggered them wanting to need help is in the rearview mirror. So the value of the urgent care center is to try to place somebody when they're seeking help, that day if possible. And they're in different parts of the state. They've shown some promise, and so I'd want to get one of those up here in Middlesex County.
Okay.
Another thing is aftercare programs. When you do finish your treatment, trying to get people jobs, it's a difficult thing because now you've got a drug history. So sort of identifying Corey-friendly jobs, and also just monitoring people, meeting with them. There's a program, again, in the Boston area, in Arlington, called Column Healthcare. They've shown some success with intensive aftercare treatment, and they've got a few locations now. And so I think we need to look at things like that in this area to help us with the opioid issues that we have.
Okay. So like anything else, this is no exception. How do you find funding for programs like this? Because this clearly isn't going to be an inexpensive program. This is going to require some funding to it.
So, fortunately, I think, Massachusetts has done well. There's budget surplus this year. That's partly why I call for tax reform for seniors. I think they should be sharing in the surplus. And I think we've got new sources of revenue coming online, right? We have recreational marijuana facilities now being licensed.
Right, yeah.
We've got a casino that just opened in Springfield. So, I'm not looking to increase any broad-based taxes at the moment. I don't think that's necessary, not when you're running a budget surplus and not when you have this additional revenue coming online. So, certainly the marijuana revenue should, I think, first and foremost be targeted to people with addiction. And so those would be my initial ideas of how we fund some of these things.
Okay. Switch gears just a little bit. So as a senator, you'd have to work rather closely with the governor on a number of issues. Is there anything that comes to mind that you say agree with very strongly with the governor?
So I think he's committed to dealing with this opioid crisis. I think they've put a real good faith effort into crafting some legislation to solve some problems, and I do think it's a good first step. So I would like, I don't think we're there yet. I think even the governor would tell you that. But it's a real problem in every community in our state. I think he's committed to dealing with it, I think, in an earnest way. And I would look forward to working with him on things like that. I think that's one thing the governor's shown real leadership on, and I think that's something I could embrace and work with him on.
Okay. Is there anything that you disagree with the governor on? Any big issues?
So I think the education funding's been a disappointment.
Okay.
I think not having implemented the findings of the Foundation Budget Review Commission is a problem. Certainly there's some blame in the legislature, to own that problem, but the governor really hasn't done much to advance that either. And so I think the next big area that's ripe for reform, where the governor maybe hasn't done that well, is education reform and funding reform.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit now about a different issue, the issue of gun control in the state. So it's been, Massachusetts is very strict, let's say, on its with its gun control. And recently we had the Attorney General who decided to change her mind basically on the way the Massachusetts assault weapons ban was interpreted. First of all, what's your stance on gun control in the state, and would you be for or against any furtherance in gun control legislation?
So, I think I do support, the assault weapons ban that Massachusetts has. I think that's something we need. I think the school, not just the school shootings that we see across the country. Really, we've been fortunate enough to not have things like that in Massachusetts.
Yes. We've been very lucky.
If you look at just the overall data, right? Yes, we have strict gun control laws here, but we also have fewer deaths from gun incidents here in Massachusetts. And so some people think that's a direct correlation. So, I think we do it right here in Massachusetts. The laws are strict, but if you want a firearm, you can get one. I think, and no one's saying you can't get one. I think, though, that people need to have proper training, proper credentialing before they can get a firearm, and then show that they're a responsible firearm user. I think the scheme we have in Massachusetts works well, and I'd be supportive of the current state of the law.
Okay. Now, how about with the issue of illegal guns getting into the wrong hands, being that they're illegal now? What would you do to sort of help, I guess, to either get those guns off the street, or to be, would you be tougher on crime, or try to, get judges to be more strict with their sentencing?
So, we have a pretty strict gun law now, right? If you use a gun in commission of a crime, it's a mandatory 1-year sentence.
Now, I will interject on that just to say that a lot of times that gets plea bargained away.
Right.
And so they never see that, year mandatory time.
Right. So, again, I think that's a balancing act in each particular case, right? But, certainly to get guns off the street is a major goal. When I worked with the police chief in Lowell, they were very successful, and it usually comes out of arrests, right? Arrests, and they find illegal guns, and that's the main avenue, I think, toward getting illegal guns off the street, is just, when you're involved in crime and there are arrests made, that's the most effective method.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. So another thing that's been coming up, unfortunately, in the news lately, we've had this a couple of judges who, unfortunately, were letting criminals out early, letting these guys out. And unfortunately, these people that were let out went on to kill a couple of officers. It probably would have killed anybody who they came across, but it happened to be officers. Would you propose any type of legislation that would be more strict on these judges letting these guys out early, who then go off and commit some kind of heinous act?
Yeah, I would, and I think I think it is a problem with laws, right? I think when you tell a judge he can't consider somebody's dangerousness when he's setting bail, for example, that's a problem, right? I think that's a problem. Now, here in the current state of the law, you can't have a dangerousness hearing and all that, but I think it's got to become much more routine than it is. At least give the district attorneys the option of having a dangerousness hearing almost immediately. Right now, you have to wait 10 days.
Oh, okay.
During that 10 days, if the person makes bail, that's an opportunity for further crime to be committed. So yeah, I do think there are legislative reforms that are certainly needed. One is consideration of dangerousness in the setting of either bail or no bail conditions.
Okay. This one's a rather interesting topic, I think. It's the issue of sanctuary states. It's been chimed out in the news lately across the country. Do you think Massachusetts should be a sanctuary state?
So, no, I don't. And I don't think those terms are particularly helpful. There was a bill proposed in this legislative session, did not pass, right? There are things in that bill that I would support. Things like, I don't think there should be a registry for Muslims or any other religion, right? Those types of things. But there are other reform type measures too. Right now, Massachusetts police departments really aren't authorized to hold somebody who's in the country illegally at all, right? I think there needs to be some, and there was some proposal in this legislation which would allow the police to hold somebody until ICE came to pick up somebody who was a dangerous person, needed to be deported. So that type of reform was in this legislation. I support that reform, and it didn't pass, right? So we need the ability to keep our communities safe is where it comes down to for me. And that means, yes, being able to hold people when they're commission of a crime, but also having people not being afraid to report a crime when they're a victim of a crime.
Good point.
So, so I think the police need to be trusted in the immigrant communities, and I don't, so I support some of the elements of the bill that was in the Safe Communities Act, but I don't support a sanctuary bill for Massachusetts.
Okay, good. So we're winding down time. Are there any other issues you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
So, I talked a little bit about the property tax reform. I thought we
did briefly touch on it. Yep, for the seniors.
But other things I've worked on, is I've been a long-time volunteer at Duville Senior Care, for example.
Oh, okay.
Just to show my commitment to senior citizens. I've been on that board for over 20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When I first joined, Duville was a very well-run and sort of nice nursing home, right? Today, it's much more than that.
It's amazing today.
Right,
yeah, it's really changed.
There is rehab services, Alzheimer's treatment. There's assisted living. There's independent living. It's really a sort of full-service campus now for seniors with housing needs, medical needs, treatment needs. And so that's part of the work I've done sort of in my adult life, right? I think when we started talking, I said, this was sort of a continuation of my life's work. I mean, I've been working on these types of issues, for 20, 25, 30 years in some cases. And I'd like to do more at the legislative level to advance these causes. So I would be supportive of places like Duville in the legislature. I'd be supportive of jobs and economic development. I'd be supportive of education, as I mentioned. Something we haven't talked about is housing. Everybody knows about the high cost of housing.
Yep.
When I was a city councilor, I came up with an idea, 2 for Lowell, we called it, because it was related to 2-family homes, but it wouldn't need to be just 2-family homes. We provided down payment assistance to first-time home buyers, and your portion of your loan would be forgiven for every year you stayed in the house. So that's sort of built a neighborhood, right? House by house by house. If you're living there, you're taking care of the property. You've got pride in the place, and you get a little financial reward for doing that.
That sounds like a fantastic program, actually.
So we ran it, I think 7, 8 years, almost 100 families. I think it was between 75 and 100 families did benefit from it. We ran out of funding at one point, and I know Massachusetts has just started to look at first-time homebuyer assistance on a broader level. So my experience, I think, would be valuable in pushing these programs at the state level.
Excellent. Was that program in conjunction with Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership, or is that a separate program? It's
separate, but certainly if you went through the Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership program, you would have that training and you'd be able to qualify for one of the 2 for Lowell grants.
Excellent. That was, I'll say, just so I can, because I have a little experience with that. I used the Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership program, and it was excellent. It really made a difference when we went to buy our first home. So it's a very, very cool program, and that sounds like a really neat program that you're talking about too.
Yeah, and I mean, they do great work at the Housing Partnership. I've been a lecturer in some of their classes. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we're basically out of time at this point. So if you want to just again tell people who you are and why you would request their vote, you have the floor.
Okay. So again, my name's Bill Martin. I'm a candidate for state senate here in Tyngsborough and surrounding communities. I've spent my life as a development attorney and small business attorney at the firm of Eno, Martin, Donahue, and Lowell. Former Lowell mayor, longtime city councilor in the city of Lowell. I've got practical political experience and business experience. I am a small businessman in a sense. We employed at times anywhere between 6 and 10 people. Our payroll ranges are from year to year, but at a minimum, $250,000 every year. I know what it's like to have somebody relying on you to make their paycheck, and I know what it's like to get paid last at the end of the month instead of first. Making your payroll. So I've got business experience, I've got government experience that other candidates in this race don't have. I think that's what distinguishes me and makes me the best candidate. I'll do a good job for the citizens of Tyngsborough as a state senator down in Boston. I'll be your voice, and I'd ask you to vote for me, Bill Martin, on Tuesday, November 4th. Thanks for your time.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Bill, for coming on. I appreciate your time and wanting to come on and chat with the folks. I hope that the folks at home, all of the residents here in Tyngsborough and wherever else this is being viewed, you guys got a little bit of information so that when on September 4, primary day, you'll have some info going into the polls, and you'll be able to make a good informed decision. As I stated earlier, I've interviewed also Senate candidate Rodney Elliott as well. So that video as well as this video are available on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, as well as on tyngsboroughma.gov, and you can watch them here in town on Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 29. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me, sbrogan@tyngsboroughma.gov, or you can also send messages in through the Facebook page as well. So again, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you guys got a little bit of information. And Bill, again, thank you for coming on. And with that said, everybody, hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.